Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you are in other areas of this amazing blue planet of ours, happy Friday. Of course, this may not be Friday for you if you're watching on the YouTubes or whatever. We record all of these episodes of CDO Matters Live. Hey, everybody. I'm Malcolm. I'm going to be your tour guide today around all things data and analytics conference related. So it's spring, at least it's spring in the Northern Hemisphere. I understand we actually have a reasonable number of folks who consume my content and subscribe to stuff who are on the Southern Hemisphere. So I need to be mindful of that. It's fall for them, but for us here, it is spring, which means it's spring conference season. So there's a lot of conferences going on, and I get to go to a lot of them. And frankly, some of these are actually kind of expensive, right? They take a lot of time. And I know from personal experience in the past, not everybody gets to go to these things. So we're going to talk about conferences and what I've seen, some of the trends that I'm seeing evolve. But as usual, we're going to give it a few minutes for people to congregate. Where is everybody joining from today? You can say in the chat and LinkedIn, we've got two kind of pathways into this content. One is through LinkedIn. You may be just coming into LinkedIn. That's amazing. Hello, LinkedIn. And the other is through our Goldcast recording platform. If you're there, you can drop something into the chat. You can drop something into the messages. And hey, folks, this is also an Ask Me Anything. So if you've got questions about data strategy, data governance, data stewardship, data quality, basically if it has data in your question or even vaguely related to data, heck, if it's not even related about data, you could ask me. You can ask me anything because that is the main point. We started these monthly sessions as Ask Me Anything, and where I could share my knowledge of being in this space for 30 years with you. So if you've got questions, drop them in the chat. But let me know, hey, where are you joining from today? Because we're going to give a few minutes for people to get online, and I'm going to just call out some people. Hello, thank you for joining today. I hope you get value out of the session. David from Italy, glad you could be here. Dawn, Ansley, Gregory from BMO, awesome. BMO, Bank of Montreal, I think so, BMO. I was a previous Bank of Montreal client in a previous life when I was a young buck growing up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I had a Bank of Montreal account. I technically still might. I actually think my student loans were all through Bank of Montreal. Joseph, hello. Colin, Nick, nice to see you. Hello. Don is calling. Nobody's calling. Everybody's online. So like I'm talk radio. It's that's showing my age, right? Like, hey callers, where are you calling from? Tampa, Kari or Carrie? Probably Kari from Tampa. As you may know, if you were able to just fly straight east from Tampa, which you can't, you have to drive through Orlando, which is a pain. But if you could go straight east from Tampa, you would hit where I am. I'm in Melbourne on the East Coast. So directly across from you, but there's no easy way to get from here to there that doesn't involve the hell on earth that is known as I-4. But you know that well. But hey, thanks for joining. Catherine, hello from Jayberg. That is awesome. South Africa. Nick from Duluth. Love it, Nick. Still not warm. I was talking to my beloved sister who lives in Edmonton, Alberta, and they got just under a foot of snow yesterday. So yeah, still winter in some parts of the world. Tia, hello from Atlanta. Glad you could be joining. And if I'm mispronouncing your names, please forgive me. Trust me, I know how that feels. Often people mispronounce my name. Generally, they're misspelling my name. They're not necessarily mispronouncing it, but they're certainly misspelling it. You'd be amazed what I've seen. Apurva, hello, my friend. How are you? I owe you a response. You asked a wonderful question, and I owe you a response on DM on LinkedIn. By the way, folks, if you've got questions that weren't answered today, DM me on LinkedIn. I get like 30 or 40 a day, so forgive me if I don't respond quickly because most of those DMs are people trying to sell me stuff. You know how it is. People are selling stuff on LinkedIn. But if you've got questions that I don't answer today, hey, send me a message on LinkedIn. And if, by the way, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, we need to be connected on LinkedIn, please. Catherine from Toronto. Jesus from Spain. Catherine, I'll be up in Toronto. When will I be in Toronto? I should know this. There's a data leadership summit, May 29th. It is, I believe, at the MTC, the Microsoft Technology Center downtown. The Microsoft Technology Center in Toronto is amazing. It's like on the 40th floor, looking down on Maple Leaf Gardens. It's amazing. It makes me feel like a real grown up. Like when I go to these offices and like I dress up and I'm on the 40th floor, I always feel so grown up. Like I'm here in my little cave in Florida now, and I don't have to feel grown up. But when I go and visit those things in places like Toronto, which is an amazing city, by the way, if you've never been, you definitely should go. Hello, Manoj from Hyderabad, also on my list. Oh yeah, you've been, Catherine. Yeah, it's got an amazing view. Jesus in Spain, Detroit, Aperva. On a really clear day, yeah, I don't think you could still see Toronto, but you could definitely see Windsor. You can see the casino in Windsor across the river from from Detroit. Yes, Canada brings its best at the southern border in Windsor is with casinos across the river from Detroit. But I love Detroit. It's a great city. All right, guys, let's get into it. Oh, I need to say hello to my friends on LinkedIn. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, Ashish, Sachin from New York. Data sustainability. We can certainly talk about that, Ashish. Most certainly. I'm passionate about that. We've got some problems with data hoarding. We store a lot of data we don't need to be storing. And it's only getting worse in an era of AI. So let's put that on the docket if we've got time at the end. I would steer you to an article that I wrote in Forbes, actually a couple of years ago now. If you search my name, Hawker, Forbes, hoarding, data hoarding, you'll find an article that I wrote in Forbes a couple of years ago about our hoarding problem. So if we don't get to that today, check that article out on Forbes. Ranga, hello from Zurich. Yasha in Bakersfield in the Central Valley. Joyce, so nice to see you, my friend. How are you? Barbara, hello from Amsterdam. I was just there 2 weeks ago. I spent 5 days in Amsterdam, in central Amsterdam, I stayed in a hotel right next to Central Station in Amsterdam. There's a DoubleTree hotel that is right there, across from a floating Chinese restaurant. You may know where that is, but had some quality time in Amsterdam. Speaking of MTCs, that's where I was, Microsoft Technology Centers. Sudhir from Bangalore, glad you could make it. Rachel in Wisconsin, hello, Ranga. Denver, Kuldeep, glad you're here as well. Love Denver. Been there. Have I been there this year? Yes. I went to a Dama event in Centennial, Colorado. Obviously, I get around. Hey, let's talk about conferences. So I made a post yesterday on LinkedIn. Feel free to check it out. But let's start there. What's happening kind of at conferences? Let's just talk about the general vibe that I'm seeing, and then we'll get into actual topics. And I won't spend too much time talking about the general vibe, because I know you probably came for trends and what are the hottest things that we're seeing in data and analytics, and I want to touch on that. But let's talk about conferences. Conferences are changing. I've been going to them, obviously, for a long time. This is real gray hair here, folks. I've been going to conferences for a while, and they're changing. I really get the sense that people, particularly younger people, don't want as much. They still want some, but they don't want to be talked at. I think they want to be talked with. I get a real sense that conference attendees want to collaborate more. They want to interact more. They want to be part of the discussion, and they don't want to necessarily just always, sometimes, but not always, just be sitting in the chair and talked at. That's something that I'm seeing. I saw this at Day-to-Day Texas, where there were breakout sessions. They were really well attended, and they were fantastic, talking about specific problems. I see this at Dataversity events, where we're having these things called special interest groups, where people are getting together in small groups to talk about big problems in our world. These are two examples where I see this gradual shift of, yes, there's still a time and place for, thousands of people to be gathered in a room where they're listening to people, talk about things. But I'm seeing this trend to be more collaborative, where maybe even after the conference, those communities kind of continue to exist. There may be opportunities there for conference organizers to build more community around their conferences. Speaking of community, that's really what I experienced at Day-to-Day Texas. There is this sense, this palpability of community. And I think that's an area where things are kind of changing in conferences. Another thing that I'm seeing is that people less and less and less want to be sold. People don't want to be sold. They don't want to go through the exhibit halls. Sometimes they go with specific problems, and sometimes they want to engage vendors, but often I just think that less and less people want to be sold. And I get it. I understand that. If you're paying several thousands of dollars to go to these conferences, sometimes that's the price. Like Gartner is thousands and thousands. The last thing you want to do is go be sold. And I get it. But that's a real challenge for conference organizers because those venues aren't free, right? Those hotels aren't free. Those meals aren't free. The free popcorn in the afternoon break isn't free. So, it's a really tough trade-off there for conference organizers to figure out how do you support vendors and sponsors at the same time, give people the conference experience they want where they don't necessarily, have to be sold all the time. So I get it. I do think that there is still a need for in-person experiences for sure. People want to interact with peers. They want to hear what other people are doing to solve problems. They want to develop a sense of community. So conferences are not going away. They're most certainly not going away. There's still a need and a desire I see for people to get together, but I think the overall tenure is kind of changing, and it'll be interesting to see where things go over the next few years and how conference organizers deal with this. So that's that. If you've got different perspectives, I'd love to hear them. But I think there are unique opportunities for conference organizers to kind of change and to become a little more collaborative, a little more community centric. And I don't have all the answers there, and I don't necessarily know what that looks like, but I'm seeing this. So, all right, let's talk about some of the key trends. I'll focus a little bit on Gartner at the beginning because I think they Gartner, for better or worse, like it or not, they do set the tone when it comes to things like key trends, things that people are talking about and they're not talking about, for better or worse. I do need to start with a disclaimer. As many of you may know, of course, I worked for Gartner for 3 years. I was a Gartner analyst. I kind of have insights here into how a lot of these things work and their processes. And I'll be honest, I have a high bar. I expect a lot from Gartner conferences and from Gartner analysts because I was one, and I generally expect a certain degree of excellence if I'm going to be spending thousands and thousands of dollars. So I've got high expectations, and my bar is pretty high. But I'm not afraid to give criticism where I think criticism is due. I made a post on LinkedIn talking about some of my experiences at Gartner, and I got feedback that said I was Gartner bashing. And I need to think about that a little bit more. I need to think more if I'm being excessively critical, because I don't want to be. Gartner is an amazing company that offers great insights to its clients. Don't get me wrong. It is a great company. They have a lot to offer, and their analysts are incredibly smart, and they are deeply caring people. But at the same time, I'm a huge believer in what is known as a growth mindset. I wrote an entire book about growth mindsets. It's coming out in a couple of months in Amazon. Check it out. It's called the Data Hero Playbook. I'm totally excited about it. But I'm a believer in growth mindsets. And a key to a growth mindset is the ability and the need and the desire to seek feedback. So if you've got feedback about how I'm doing things, I would love to hear them. And my perspective is I wasn't Gartner bashing. I was actually providing feedback. So, but at the same time, I do know that I can be rather critical because I've got insights into things and how things work that maybe other people don't. So maybe I've got a little bit of a kind of inside advantage there when it comes to, the right way to attack the Death Star. And I just drew a metaphor of Gartner and a Death Star. I'm kidding. But I need to be mindful, I think. So anyway, with that in mind, AI, oh boy, AI. We are still figuring AI out. That is my high level takeaway from every conference that I've been to, by the way. This isn't just Gartner, everyone. I was at a conference last week in London, IRM Data and Analytics, Data and Master Data Management, Data Governance Conference. I was Day-to-Day Texas. I've been at multiple small conferences, was at one in Amsterdam. I was just talking about. We're still figuring out AI. And we are still struggling to move beyond what I would call platitude and into actual get done, right? And I see this over and over again. I will give you a very specific example. There's a lot of conversations these days around AI being actual get it done, right? You need your data to be AI ready. That is what is known as a platitude. We get it. Of course we do. Another platitude, by the way, is our old friend garbage in, garbage out. It's a platitude. It on its own means nothing. Its platitudes, by definition, are unassailable, mean they're hard to argue, right? It's really difficult to argue that you need your data to be AI ready. We're in the data business, is what we do, and AI is growing, so we need to make the data AI ready. My LinkedIn window has frozen. I hope that's not a prolonged problem. I'm going to take a quick timeout. Hey, Kayla, is everything fine? Because my LinkedIn window just froze. I assume everything's fine. Give me a message, Kayla, though, that everything's looking fine. AI ready data. We need data to be AI ready. We all know this. Okay, great. What does that actually mean? How do I change my data quality processes to make my data more AI ready? How do I adapt my governance processes to make my data more AI ready? What's different between what I do today with data quality and what I need to do tomorrow with data quality, specifically to make it AI ready? We don't have the answers to these questions yet. And that's okay. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a problem. Maybe I shouldn't say it's okay. It's something. We don't have the answers to those questions. And anybody that is saying that we do have the answers, well, they're not giving them. They're not being forthright about them, because I have yet to see anybody say, hey, this is what we need to do. Where we are is up here, is at more of a platitude level where we talk about, hey, focus on foundations. Really? Okay, I need to focus on data quality to make sure my data is quality for AI. Get it. Great. What does that mean? Gartner defines AI ready data. This is big, folks. So this is big. Gartner defines AI ready data as data that accurately represents the source insofar as the needs of the use case. So think about that. Data that accurately reflects the source as needed by the use case. Okay, so if I'm building a buyer propensity model, right? If I'm building some machine learning thing that is trying to anticipate or predict when people will buy or when they won't buy, that's the use case. I need data that will help me predict, right? Data that accurately reflects the source may not always be high quality, but still accurately reflect the source. This is a fundamental difference between how we managed for data quality today in our very deterministic BI-driven world, our analytics-driven world, where we're managing, I would largely argue, to the idea of a standard, where we generally kind of know, hey, we need the data to look this way in order to make the BI work, in order to accurately reflect the business process that we are modeling, quote to cash, procure to pay, filling out a form, right? Whatever those business processes are, we generally know when things are going to be deterministically correct or not correct, because we can model the data to some idea of a standard, to some idea of a rule, right? We need first name, last name. And even when we do things like validity, verify that data, again, it's against the standard. Is the address correct per USPS? Right? Is the person's name correct based on what they provided us? Is this address correct? Is this data, and on and on. Generally, we can apply deterministic rules, or at the very least, time-proven heuristics, to come to the idea of some sort of standard or some sort of deterministic assessment. Yes, this is correct. No, it's not correct. In a world of AI, AI-ready data is data that reflects the source. It doesn't reflect the standard. It doesn't reflect necessarily what we need in order to run the BI. It just reflects what it is. So this is an example, folks, of saying we need to be AI ready, but I don't think we have any idea what it really means in order to operationalize that. Do you agree or do you disagree? The idea of data quality, I get really hung up in data quality because the idea of data quality is fundamentally different in a world of AI. So there are people, and there were people at conferences, particularly Gartner, and I'll give a shout out to Melody Chen, who's their lead data quality analyst, asking some of these hard questions. And that's good. It's necessary. It's step one. But when it comes to we need to do these things in order to support data quality for AI, I don't think we know. I just don't think we know because I don't think we know how to answer those questions yet. The kind of the Apple credit use case was highlighted many times in discussions of data quality. And if you're familiar with this was going back years where a husband and wife both applied for a credit card and they were given different decisions. Even though they were married, they were given different credit limits. The man actually happened to get more credit than the wife, even though they're married and their credit should be viewed as one. That was touted as an example of where the data was actually accurate. The data was correct per the data, but the outcome was not correct. Here again, we have this idea of, okay, well, is that data AI ready? I think you could argue, yeah, it actually was. But what didn't perform, or where the break was in the software that was making the decision, was in the model that was making the decision. Here's another area where I really struggled to get clarity and continue to struggle to get clarity on conferences between governance of data, which we do for a living, and governance of software systems. And what I mean by software systems, models. Right? We are saying, okay, these models need to live under the CDO because they're related to data, but are they? This is another thing that I've been seeing as a common theme across all of the conferences is that we struggle to articulate the demarcation between what is our responsibility from a governance perspective in terms of AI, particularly models and model behavior. What is our responsibility and what is the responsibility generally of a CTO organization that is building software to do things like agentic AI, like is building the software that will be the agents that are executing, that are running a lot of these models. There's actually even 3 layers of abstraction there. There's the data, there's the core model, then there's the agents. Today, I think you could argue 3 different organizations involved in each of those. And we're talking about AI governance. Is it the data? Is it the model? Is it the software? Is it all of it? Who owns what? I don't think we have the answers. This is something that what I've been seeing. And, I'm not trying to be overly critical, but we've been doing this 2 years. We need to figure this stuff out. I've got opinions. Shocker. Malcolm's got opinions. But I didn't hear nearly enough about, let's take example, agentic AI, right? Where there is clearly software that is going to need to be written, that is doing all sorts of stuff, execution of very complex RAG patterns on the back end, where they are invoking multiple models at the same time, right? Where there is software making a decision, this model versus this model versus this model based on the use case, right? Like that's software, right? How do we inform the governance there? How do we even delineate the behavior of the software versus the behavior of the data, or what's being influenced by the data? Again, I don't think we necessarily know. And I'm not being judgmental here, folks. It's just something I'm seeing where we keep defaulting back to platitudes. And LinkedIn, my gosh, as much as I love LinkedIn, and I made a post this week expressing my love for LinkedIn, expressing my gratitude, and that is very, very real. But my goodness, folks, be careful on LinkedIn because there is no shortage of platitude. When we start talking about garbage in, garbage out, and if we've got bad data if we got garbage data, well, then our AI is going to be garbage. Is it really? Can we say that with 100% certitude? All the time, all use cases, always? Of course we cannot. That is a platitude and it is a slippery slope. And once you fall down that slippery slope, I'm worried about our credibility because here's a reality. ChatGPT, these LLMs were built on the internet, not exactly a bastion of data quality. Yet somehow they perform pretty well. Keep that in mind. Again, AI ready data is data that is accurately reflective of the source for the use case. And in the case of ChatGPT, the use case was mimicking human speech, mimicking human thought, mimicking the creative process of humans that is sometimes fallible, that sometimes makes stuff up, right? That was the use case, which means the internet data was appropriate and AI ready. So when we throw around these platitudes like, well, it's garbage data, careful. Here's another reality. What is good for BI may not be good for AI, and vice versa. Again, nobody really talking about this. Everything we have done, everything we built, the processes we built, the teams we built, the organizational structures, the governance policies, the data quality rules, it's for BI and operational uses, of course, but it's not for AI. It's not for AI. Another thing I really struggle with around AI governance, and again, not really well covered at these conferences, is, and I'm struggling with this, folks. I would love your opinions on this. Do we need to deconstruct text that will be consumed by LLMs in order to govern it at scale for LLMs? So, meaning, let's imagine we've got a page of text. Do we need to structure that data, right, and put it and put it into arguably our legacy patterns of managing data with very deterministic rules, and put it into a structure to get it to the point where we can apply governance policies at scale, only so LLMs can be trusted at scale, can be governed at scale? Or do we just leave the data as it is and use LLMs to tell us when it's good and when it's bad? Which is ultimately, to me, is paradoxical, right? Using an LLM to tell me when it's appropriate to use the data for an AI use case. Do you see the problem? Or is it not a problem? Because when I think about this stuff, when I think about, okay, there are methodologies. I'm looking at a book. Is it on my bookshelf? By one of the smartest people in data, Bill Inman, called Turning Text into Gold. He's got a methodology. He's got a method for taking text and actually putting it into rows and columns and applying deterministic rules to it. That could be one way to solve the problem, I think. But can we do that at scale? I'm not sure we can. Again, these are really lofty, high-level questions that I'm not hearing a ton of at conferences. I don't need to belabor the point around AI governance and data governance for AI, but I can tell you, my friends, I can tell you the old way of doing things doesn't work. It's not gonna work. And I am desperate to work with people to figure out how to do this stuff at scale, because I don't think we have any idea. Like frameworks, governance frameworks, Gartner will tell you, here's a legacy framework, here's an AI framework. AI frameworks add things like ethics and bias, those types of things. But again, is that the behavior of a model or a software or of the data when it comes to bias and ethics? Is there bias baked into data? I think there probably is. How do we get rid of that? If AI ready data is data that is reflective of this, accurately reflects the source, and there's bias cooked into the data, do we get rid of that at the data layer? Or is that something that the software should be handling, the model should be handling? I don't know. I don't know. So I have more questions here than answers. Hey, Ryan, you struggle with a philosophical question. Do we ultimately structure data no matter what? I don't know. It seems to me, Ryan, like maybe we're trying to cram this round peg into a square hole when we just leave it as a peg. We just leave it as a peg. Do we want to run classic BI on some of that text? Yeah, we probably do. Yeah, we probably do. So maybe it's both, right? We want to do some kind of classic pie charts, bar charts on to draw some conclusions on all that text. Maybe we don't, though. And maybe the LLMs are going to be the best position to tell us when we do or we don't want to do these things. So I don't want to necessarily belabor the point, but my gosh, if I'm a CDO or VP of data and analytics, even a data governance manager, data quality manager, and I'm being asked, hey, make our data AI ready. Boy, I don't. That's a challenge. It's a real challenge, and we've got to figure it out as an industry, and we've got to move beyond the platitude. We have got to move beyond the old ways of thinking. We've got to stop saying dumb stuff like garbage in, garbage out. It means nothing in the world of AI. It literally means nothing in the world of AI, but we throw it around all the time. We throw it around all the time. Drives me nuts. Marcus, hey, it's good to see you, Marcus. Why was data not ready for big data a few years back? That's a good question. Ownership and governance not really a priority for the business. Well, I could talk about data ownership all day long. And there's another platitude, right? What does data ownership mean? I think there's at least 5 different owners, people who could rightfully claim ownership of data, right? The person who created the data, the person who is consuming the data, the person who's writing a data governance policy affecting the data, the person who's doing something to enforce the data governance policy affecting the data sovereign, the person who created it, my data about me. The idea that any one person could own all of those, I especially for data that is widely shared, I'm a little worried, Marcus, that these concepts like data owner in a world of AI, like I'm really worried that we're talking about like writing on the cave wall type stuff when the AI is all the way over, and it's a totally different paradigm, different framework, different perspective. Yes, some of these old perspectives are arguably necessary to support a world of BI, but I don't know if they're right for AI. I just don't. Shocker Hawker. That's awesome. Bridge silos. Yes, of course. Silos still a huge problem. Opinion, Marcus, data goes horizontal, but the world loves functional silos. Well, hey, here's an interesting thing. It's a really good point, Marcus. I think you may be right. Put another way, marketing department of company A has way more in common with marketing department of company B than marketing department of company A has with finance department of company A. There's marketing departments have way more in common with each other than marketing and finance within a given company. Think about that. I think that may not be the horizontal you're talking about. Maybe you're talking more about industry, right? You layer in industry as well. I think both are valid perspectives, but I do see an evolution here where marketing groups or finance groups or procurement groups, because of those areas of commonality, start cooperating more. A great example here is a company called CDQ, cdq.ch, a Swiss company that is creating a data sharing network to solve for specific manufacturing supplier-centric use case. That is one small example of these things. So I'm with you. I'm taking a little bit of a break. I'm looking at some of the comments. Oh, great comments, guys. Great comments. Sharefat, hey, great to see you. It was wonderful to see you in London. Great to see you out. Thank you for coming. Henrik, thank you for coming. Mark, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Mark Twain. We got people quoting Mark Twain on our chat here, folks. This is fantastic. Chris in Buffalo. Wonderful. Okay, well, you can see Toronto on a clear day. Thank you so much for joining today, guys. So AI governance, boy, that's a real challenge. I don't think anybody really kind of has any idea what that means. I mean, conceptually, high level, yes. But again, old ways of thinking, I think, are holding us back. We need to start thinking about these things very, very differently. Data fabric, not going away. Data, speaking of not going away, the data mesh. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that I have evolved. I was a big mesh contrarian. There's a lot of things with the original mesh. Now, as defined by Zhamak Dehghani in the book Data Mesh, which I've read 3 times because I had to read it 3 times because apparently I'm not that smart. Data mesh defined by Zhamak, I was a big critic because of some flaws that I saw in the model, particularly related to cross-domain use cases. Cross-domain use cases, also the idea that certain centralized things like data warehouses and MDMs were what Zhamak would call an anti-pattern. The original mesh conceptually said that all patterns of centralization were bad. And I think where we are now is the mesh has kind of evolved, mesh V2, where it's no longer an anti-pattern to have a data warehouse where it's arguably part of a best practice for a data mesh, where really what we're talking about is domain centricity, domain autonomy, federated operating models. Fine. Okay. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with, slapping the label of data product owner on somebody. I'd rather see that person actually be a real product manager with product management experience and product management training. That's where I think the greatest value is. That's the shift right, my beloved shift right. But shift left is growing on me. Why? Because on the left, that's going to be AI. Most of our customers in the future are going to be machines. They won't be people. They will be machines. They will be agents that have been tasked to go do an analysis. So it makes complete sense that those agents are interacting with data contracts. It makes complete sense that those agents understand all the metadata associated with a given data product, right? That they see the lineage and are able to understand the context, are able to understand security and access, understand all those things so that they are doing and they're creating these data insights in conformity with a data governance policy associated to that data product. So I am now a believer in shifting left because I think it's necessary to drive the scale needed to support customers who just happen to be robots, metaphorical robots. But data mesh has continued, it's evolved, and there were plenty of conversations that I've seen around data mesh. 25% of companies are saying they're doing a data mesh, including one of my co-presenters at IRM, Volvo Cars, say they're implementing a data mesh. Plenty of that are saying it, and largely what it is domain, federated models, domain autonomy over analytics with data product owners, and that's cool. But I actually do think that like data contracts, like some of the things around federated automated governance, is arguably going to be necessary in a world where our customers are robots. Data catalogs, my gosh, the shiny new thing. I lost track when I was at Gartner of how many times, and by the way, I attended all these sessions at Gartner after Gartner. One of the great things is that they will give you, as a part of they'll give you a login to their online platform, and you can watch all the presentations. And I watched almost all of them, like 30 plus presentations. So this isn't me running around taking notes. This is actually me being here in my bat cave in Florida, where I was watching these Gartner presentations, where I was maniacally taking a lot of notes for the span of 3 to 4 days. All I was watching was Gartner presentations. And I lost track of how many times somebody was saying, go get a data catalog, go get a data catalog. I love data catalogs. They're great. As data librarians, we need to get our hands around all our data. We need to know what's out there. We need to know the card catalog, as it were. However, if you are in a position of authority, making investments around data management tools and technology, data catalogs in and of themselves are not driving much value for the business. Is it great to have one place to go access your data? Yes. But if you're following a federated model, like most companies are, right? If you're following a federated model and you go into a data catalog and type in customer master and you see 15 things, that can end up doing more harm than good, I would argue. And that's how a lot of companies are deploying data catalogs. And a lot of companies have a little bit of a hangover in data catalogs because what people are seeing is all the dirty laundry, which is the fact we've got 15 customer masters, right? So word to the wise, data catalogs are foundational. They're important. They are part of a modern data ecosystem. They will form the foundation of these evolving data fabrics. However, if you're in a position of authority who's deploying these technologies, keep in mind, they in of themselves are not driving a ton of business value and may have some deleterious impacts in the short term. This is where things like MDM and data quality tools can help. They can help, right? Where you could do things like maybe reduce some of your duplicate records related to customers so people don't see the same thing 15 times over in a data catalog. Peas and carrots, these things go together, right? MDM, data quality, data integration go together hand in hand with data catalogs. So we need to be thinking about these things in tandem. Does that mean you need to buy them together? Not necessarily. What it does mean is you need to be focused on delivering that business value, solving a specific problem. Because if my problem is being solved, if I'm getting value, I'm way more likely to be totally comfortable with the fact there's 15 customers in my catalog when there should really only be one. Get my point? Anyway, data catalogs. Everybody's talking about data catalogs. My friend Juan Cicada and Tim Gasper had like 400 people, standing room only, in their presentation at Gartner related to data catalogs. So it's a testament to a lot of folks focusing on data catalogs. But again, keep in mind, data catalogs in and of themselves, there's nobody in marketing saying, oh, if I only had a data catalog. They're not saying it. My friend Francis O'Rafty actually had a post yesterday on LinkedIn very similar to this, where I totally and completely agree. Some of the things I'm noting, and I have noticed, and this is not new, by the way, this is sadly a repeating theme, is we are really, really focused on the how. Yeah, and this is not news. We know this, but we're really focused on the how. And I really wish that in some of these conferences we focus more on the why. Right. And that doesn't need to be just, data strategy. Focus more on the why. What would it be like to be at a data conference where you see somebody give a presentation around procurement best practices? Would that be helpful? I think it'd be helpful. If you're managing a supplier master, if you're managing analytics related to item master, material master, and I'm just using master, doesn't matter, anything related to a procurement process, and if your company does manufacture, you make stuff, hey, would it be great to see the basics of what makes a procurement organization hum, or what makes a sales and marketing organization hum, and the data and how data is used at a high level within those functions? And trust me on this one, folks, they all look largely the same. There's a reason why procure to pay is a universal catch-all for a certain business process, because everybody does it. And I'm telling you, they all look largely the same. Some nuances by industry, of course. Some nuances by business, of course. But a lot of these core business processes look largely the same. Maybe this is what you mean by horizontal, Marcus, because again, these business processes can most certainly be modeled. I would argue the AI is going to model them out, and we'll know what good looks like. But my point here is that instead of all these data conferences where we're just focused on inwards on what we do, right, and on technologies and on data, could we take a little bit more of an outward focus and start talking more about the why and what our business partners care about? Right? I think we could. I think there's an opportunity there. There's certainly we'd benefit by it. What else did I notice in some of these conferences? I'm looking at some of my notes. I talked about the fabric. Oh, so data management platforms in the fabric. This is an interesting one. I would argue, and this is based on what I'm seeing at conferences, particularly Gartner, but not exclusively. I would argue, and this is something that actually Mike Ferguson shared an amazing presentation at IRM in London a couple of weeks ago around this, that our legacy approach to managing data from an infrastructure perspective, from a technology perspective, necessarily needs to change. What we are seeing is that the infrastructure layer, storage and compute, okay, is largely being commoditized, right? Is largely being commoditized. And there are three big players. They are the cloud hyperscalers, right? They are the cloud service providers. They're Amazon, they're Google, and they're Microsoft. And that within each of those kind of three silos, yes, a lot of companies are multi-cloud. I get it, which is a unique problem in and of itself. But across each of those silos, within any one of those silos, data management vendors. So if you're a vendor, if you're selling data quality software, or if you're selling a data catalog, if you're like an Elation or a Calibra selling a data catalog, you need to have a story around how you integrate to one of those three data management platforms, because the persistence layer is being commoditized. And because of that, the value is moving, I would argue, up the chain, where the Microsofts and Amazons and Googles of the world will increasingly be looking at data management ecosystems as ways to drive incremental value beyond just storage and compute, which are highly commoditized. If you are just competing on a commodity, storage, compute, going to be really, really hard to build a business model around that long term. So those providers are going to be increasingly looking at data management ecosystems as ways to differentiate, and vendors need to find a way to plug into those ecosystems. Interestingly, that necessarily doesn't mean that we're talking about Snowflakes and Databricks, because those are analytical infrastructures. Those are analytical infrastructures. And yes, being able to tell a data quality story in Snowflakes is great, or MDM story in Snowflake is great. Those things are great for that analytical use case. But there's a whole other world out there that is operational in nature. Again, that we are not talking enough about. We are not talking enough about this. I've seen over and over and over again at all these conferences where we're talking about analytics, and I get it, we're data and analytics. But on the data side of the data and analytics equation, the data side, that data is used both in analytics and on the operations side. That data is consumed in CRM systems, ERP systems, procurement systems. And there is an evolution that is slowly happening here where, at least on the analytics side, things are quickly becoming very, very commoditized, and the tools here need to deeply integrate to those platforms. And in time, something will start to evolve that ends up looking like what Gartner would call a data fabric. I would argue. I think Google and Amazon are way behind in this game, but I think they'll eventually start catching up. But there's interesting things here around semantic layers. There's interesting things around graph and the role that graph plays. Here's another one. Graph. Everybody talking about graph. That's another key theme that I've heard at a lot of these conferences, and I get it, because graph is critical. Why is everybody talking about graph? Is because it is critical to apply the context to structured data that is needed for AI to consume that data, for LLMs specifically, not all AI, LLMs to consume data. Because when you point an LLM at a table, it's going to struggle. Right? The results are not going to be as good as if you pointed it at a big blob of text, or at the very least, a graph that is providing contextual insights. So at the beginning of the conversation, I was having this philosophical wonderment around, do we need to take text and chunk it out and break it and decompose it into, specific objects and specific things? The opposite is true as well. The question is, it could be asked, do we need to take stuff that is buried in rows and columns and then try to apply context to it? I think the answer is yes. On that one, I think the answer is absolutely positively yes, because we built everything we've built is around this analytical infrastructure, this BI-centric infrastructure. And if we want data that is sitting in rows and columns today to make sense to LLMs, we need graph. So if you are in a data and analytics function and you're not talking about knowledge graphs, and you don't have a strategy related to graphs, you need one. You need one, because I don't know how I don't know how you are going to get to the point of even being able to build these complex RAG patterns. By the way, shout out to my friend John Cook. If you don't follow John Cook, Cook with an E, Jon, Cook with an E. If you don't follow him on LinkedIn, you need to. It's crazy smart, where his company is focused on trying to solve a lot of these problems, right? These extremely complex RAG patterns that are helping to make sense of data that is stuck and buried in rows and columns. And when I say rows and columns, it's not, maybe it's file based. You get my point. Structured sources, highly structured sources, and to try to make sense of that so LLMs can consume it. He's working on that. My friend Wansakate is working on that as well. So graph, that's another thing that I've been hearing over and over at the conferences, and we need strategy around graph. Let me go back to the comments. Semantics. Yes, Gareth. Semantics indeed. Hello, Peter. Hope you're well. Love your comments on LinkedIn. Keep them coming. Service providers need to service native to those three main public clouds. Yes, I agree completely. They're not there today. They're not there today. Now, a lot of like Snowflake and Databricks both are trying to solve these problems, but they tend to solve these. What I mean by these problems: data management problems, data quality, data governance, MDM, even integration. Folks in those worlds, the hardcore data engineers in those worlds, tend to view these problems as kind of net new and to be solved in the context of a pipeline. Right? I'm building a pipeline. And I need to take data out of here or data out of these multiple sources, and I need to dump it over here so it can be consumed by an analytical process. And I'm going to do some magic in between, right? I'm going to do some normalization transformation. I'm going to maybe even do some matching, right, of the data. Those approaches, I would argue, are not that scalable and are not that repeatable, are not that auditable. And those are the things you need in order to run a data management organization at scale. Right? You need repeatability, you need explainability, you need configurability. You don't want complex matching buried in an ETL process. On this one, trust me, my friends, I've done this in the past, where you're trying to do matching as a part of some sort of ETLs, as some sort of a complex data pipeline. The guy that writes the matching, that writes the Python, or the gal leaves, right? And then 3 months later, you've got some auditor asking, like, why did this person get a copy of the invoice for the wrong company? Why did Acme get beta incorporated as invoice? And you can't answer why, because the matching rules are buried in some code. No bueno. Where was I going with this? Anyway, to your point, Peter. Yes, the cloud services providers need to start figuring this stuff out. They need to start putting some more definition around what this data management layer is going to look like. I would argue only Microsoft seems to be really kind of getting it. Databricks and Snowflake seem to be rushing to this space because I think they're desperate to find ways to differentiate beyond storage and compute, right? They're trying to find some of these value adds, but a lot of these players are I would argue, way behind. Knowledge graphs. Thanks, Gareth. That's awesome. Thank you. Oh, Tony, yes, the graph guy. I met Tony in Austin this year, but I didn't know his nickname was the graph guy. I would have just called him graph guy. I'm just looking for comments now because my brain is chock full. Data mesh case studies. Yes, thanks for sharing, Henrik. I'm sure there are some out there. Hello, Aaron Smith, my friend. Machines are already hallucinating. So, Aaron, you make a really good point. Human in the loop. To me, the quote of my Gartner conference experience was in a session with one of their top AI analysts, who is, I know personally, is incredibly smart and is incredibly plugged into the industry. Okay. You can say whatever you want about Gartner, but I can tell you, my friends, is that when I was an analyst, every day, 3 days straight, 5 times a day, I was having conversations with companies about what's working, what's not working, right? So literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations with companies. Gartner analysts have their finger on the pulse of what's happening out there. And this one AI analyst said, her exact words, "I've yet to see a human in the loop when it comes to data governance and data quality use cases for AI. I've yet to see a human in the loop." Again, there's a lot of people out there talking platitudes, human in the loop. We need to put a human in the loop. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean in a complex agentic AI workflow where you've got maybe an out-of-the-box model, probably not a custom model, you've got an out-of-the-box model, right, that is behaving in one way that you can't control, right, that is probably built off a corpus of data you can't control, or maybe you can. Maybe you are doing some sort of fine tuning on your own data. Maybe you are building a complex RAG pattern where you are consuming some of your own data, right? So you've got data, model, agents. But in this complex ecosystem, where does the human sit? And where does that human sit when you're talking about real-time transactions that are happening in microseconds, in milliseconds? Where is the human? Where's the human to make sure that, oh, whoops, no, we probably shouldn't give that credit offer to somebody, right? It's going to be, scale will demand, I've got 6 minutes, just checking. A lot of this stuff is just going to be retroactive, looking after the fact. And a lot of this tends to start looking way more like a software development lifecycle than it does the classic data governance. Starts to look more like ongoing testing of the behavior software systems, right? Yet we have everybody talking about AI governance and AI frameworks and all these things we need to do within the data and analytics space, when in reality, I think where we're going towards is this idea of AI ops. Yes, I said it, AI ops, but where we're really doing monitoring and testing in a way that looks way more like an SDLC. And the only way that we can do it at scale, here's another mind bender. The only way we can do it at scale is to use AI. The fox is literally going to be watching the chicken coop, because I don't know any other way to do it at scale. If you have somebody, a large company, where there are people interacting thousands of times a minute with these systems, and the only way to understand whether there are problems from a governance perspective is to monitor the behavior of the system at scale. Could you Monte Carlo this in advance? Maybe. But if you can't control the model, if you can't even necessarily control the data, I don't want to tell a negative story here, folks, because that's not my point. It's just, these are big questions we need to solve as an industry. And I would love to go to conferences where we sit down and say, hey, let's put a shovel in the ground and let's start figuring some of this stuff out at scale, because I'm not sure we're there yet. Well, no, I'm certain we're not there yet. So we actually kind of got a little heavy today. I didn't even mean to be heavy. I mean, this is going to be the light conversation about what I'm hearing at conferences. What are you hearing at conferences? What do you want to hear from conferences? Right? I work closely with a lot of the organizers of these conferences. And if I gave them feedback, what would you like to see? So maybe that could be your homework in our final 3 minutes, or maybe later when you're watching this on the LinkedIns or the YouTubes. What would you want to more see from conferences? How could I help conference organizers better sculpt, agendas or practices or ways of conducting these conferences? Because they're still valuable. They are still really, really valuable. We are social creatures and we like to interact with each other, and there's a lot to be gained from these conferences. But I think there's interesting things are happening in the field. So if you've got comments about what you would want to see, let me know. I would love to hear them. In my final few minutes, any other last questions before we go? Yeah, Peter, that's scary. But think about it. How are you going to do this at scale? Like if you're literally interacting with agents on the desktop, how do you do this at scale? I don't know the answer. Mitigate cascade failures. Yeah. Hey, new call. Oh, which MDM rating has more weight? Gartner Magic Quadrant or Forrester? That's easy. Gartner. Most certainly. Their methodologies, based on what I know, are far more rigorous, far more insightful. Analysts have been around a lot longer. That's just my personal opinion. It's just my personal opinion, knowing what I know, and based on popularity as well, right? There's a lot more people that are using Gartner Insights than Forrester Insights. There are very interesting things that you can get from Forrester. It's a valuable service. But if I had to pick between the two, I think Gartner is, the market would tell you that it is most certainly Gartner. And I've been told multiple times, multiple people, that Gartner plans to have the MDM Magic Quadrant come back next year. Woohoo! That's exciting. We'll see. We'll see. They've had some resource challenges related to just resource challenges that so my hope is that it does come back. Yeah, I'm with you on the yay. Any other last questions? Peter, you have some ideas. Fantastic. Please share them on this thread. If you've got ideas on how to make conferences better, I hope I touched on the things that you wanted to hear about today. If I didn't, my friends, please just drop a note into LinkedIn. If you're on Goalcast, just jump over to my feed on LinkedIn or search for this event on LinkedIn, and drop a comment into that thread. I'll probably be responding to comments for the next few days. I'm sure that I didn't get to all of them because I've got multiple windows going on here, but I am so thrilled that you could be joining us today. We do this once a month. You can ask me anything. Next month, who knows what we'll be talking about. If you've got suggestions on what we should be talking about in this Ask Me Anything, what the kind of the grounding theory or the grounding concept would be, please let me know. Thank you so much for attending. I hope to see you guys next month, same place, relatively same time. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Look forward to chatting with you more online. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Bye for now.